Morning, everybody. I say good morning because it's good morning for me here in Las Vegas, where I'm at DevLearn, one of the American shows that's part of the Learning Technologies family. And yes, that voice is the voice of somebody who's sitting at this desk at 6 a.m. for a webinar. Great to be with you for the last of the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum sessions for this year. We've got a great session coming up, and I think without much further ado, I'm just going to crack on and talk with our speaker today. Well, our speaker, what we're doing is we're having a joint conversation, and we're going to go through to a conversation with everybody in the room about this topic of consumer grade experiences for learners. It's something that's often talked about, but it's not something necessarily that I think we define very well or explore in much detail. And then ask ourselves, what are the ramifications? If we're talking about having a consumer grade experience, what does that mean? That means for a bunch of things for me. But before I start on that, I'm going to move over to our speaker this morning, who is Duncan Holmes from Cornerstone on Demand. Duncan, are you there?
Hi, Donald. Great to be joining you today. Really looking forward to the conversation. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Dominic Holmes. I am principal consultant.
Did I introduce you as Duncan, Dominic?
It's okay. That's our head of marketing. I can quite understand that, Donald. You know.
That must have been what was on my mind. I do apologise, Dominic. Over to you.
It's no problem at all. So I'm principal consultant for Cornerstone's international region. I have a fantastic job. I get to work with people and business leaders to help them maximise the return on investment they get from their investment in talent. And yes, I mean, let's take a look at what it means to deliver a consumer grade learning experience.
But before we jump into what we're going to do is we're going to go through a bunch of questions on this as we've discussed, and we're going to discuss it with our audience. What does a consumer grade learning experience mean as far as you're concerned, Dominic?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of people mistake it for perhaps a website that is fantastic to look at. And this is where I think it's really important to step back and look at some of the pioneers in this space of creating a consumer grade experience. So for me, I immediately jump to the likes of a Netflix. So what was their aim when they spent and invested in their website? It wasn't to make it look great. It was to build connection between the audience and the content. That meant that their platform was sticky. That was where you kept coming back to consume content. And for me, that has a direct parallel between or with what we're trying to achieve now with modern learning.
That's a really good analogy. And, I think I saw a recent video montage of interviews with Jeff Bezos where somebody was asking him, well, what's important at Amazon? And it was just a series of clips of him saying consumer focus, customer focus. Yeah. How are we helping the person who's using our product? It was all about focus and helping people do things. It wasn't about looking perfect. And actually, the Amazon website isn't perfect to look at, but it absolutely does its job. And the whole experience of going there is as friction-free as possible for getting you to the point of you getting what you need, which is buying something. In learning, it's more difficult helping somebody get to the stage of learning something or probably actually improving their performance as smoothly as possible, as easily as possible. And doing that doesn't necessarily mean something is good looking and looks marvelous. It could mean a combination of a whole things. It could mean that there's great use of the person's data, so we understand what skills are they trying to develop, what knowledge do they need for this job. It could be as uninterruptive as possible so that it's very much part of where somebody's working and they can get to the information and the learning they need quickly. It could be a number of things which we don't often think about when we say consumer grade. So I think what I'd like to do in this next 55 minutes together is to explore the idea of what it means to be consumer grade through that combination of questions. So introductions, you've introduced yourself, Dominic, you've correctly named yourself, which is super. I'm Donald Taylor, and I'm the chair of the Learning Technologies Conference here in London, and in London, and I also contribute to our events throughout the world. And my current obsession, and it has been actually for a couple of years, is trying to spend the coming years, I would say the last years, I don't propose retiring very soon, but I've shifted my focus from trying to make things happen to trying to help the profession itself improve. So everything I'm doing is about trying to make sure that people think about things in a slightly different way and move forward to a different approach, which is very much the theme here. How can we move towards a different approach with how people think about the user experience? Sorry. We were due to be having Claire Doody of Work in Motion chairing this session today. She's suffering some fairly severe technical problems at home, so I'm stepping into the chair and running that job. So what's going to happen is, for the rest of the session, Dominic and I will be sharing a series of questions, answering them ourselves, and then moving on to having a conversation with the audience about what does it mean for you. So, Dominic, should we get into our first question then?
Absolutely.
We've got seven questions. We've discussed this. We're not sure we're going to get through all seven, but we might do. 7 questions, covering 7 topics in 60 minutes. And do you want quickly, Dominic, to say anything about the Talent Health Index research? Because we've mentioned it here on the slides, but I kind of think it would be useful just to think about that and what people may not know exactly what it means. So could you just quickly inform people what is the Talent Health Index? By the way, I love the research.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, Cornerstone has been carrying out global research for a number of years now. And if we wind the clock back to 2020, when we carried out our first survey, it revealed something really quite important, and that is employers are more confident in their ability to equip their employees with the skills that they need to be future ready than their employees. There was something that we called the employee confidence gap. And what we've done as we've rolled that out across 2 of the next 3 years is look to provide more detail, more resolution into, first of all, does that gap persist? And secondly, companies that are managing to narrow that gap, let's find out what they're doing. Now, you talked about seven topics. In 2023, when we pulled together our Talent Health Index, these 7 topics formed the basis of that research. And the reason we did that is what we discovered is high-performing organizations, and by that I mean from a business perspective, not an HR or a learning, but from a business perspective, the confidence gap was far narrower. So we wanted to understand what they were doing differently. And that's why we started to look, if you like, at how well they were doing compared to the rest of the market across those 7 key dimensions. And those form the 7 topics for us today. You know, the headline conclusion, without wishing to give any spoilers away, is high-performing organizations were doing three fundamental things, and we call this the ABC of high performers. And first of all, they're aligned. They're aligned to what employees were prioritizing to take the next step in developing those skills. Secondly, they were balanced across each of those 7 dimensions. So it wasn't a case that they just did better in 2 or 3. They were uniformly better across all 7. The last thing, Donald, is they were connected. And this, for me, actually is the most important. And what I mean by that is when they're looking to think about how they align learning across to deliver or with business strategy, they would consider what needed to be done across each of those 7 dimensions, across each of those 7 topics. So they were very much taking a connected approach to delivering that business impact.
It's fascinating, and it actually recalls to me very much. I had a conversation last night here in Las Vegas with Kevin Wildy. His name's spelled Wild, but it's used to be. He was a fabulous chief learning officer for General Mills and award-winning guy. Everything you've said absolutely resonates with that conversation, but particularly that connection piece, the sense that it's not a series of disconnected initiatives taking place, but rather a connected, proper approach to making sure that the organization's needs and what you're doing are coherent and linked together. Let's jump in to our first question. I think I'm very excited to get going on this. If I can just move forward. I've got a connection problem here. Can we move on to the next slide, please? There we go. There we go. So let's talk about this one to begin with. I'll go first very quickly, Dominic, if that's all right on this one. And then I'd love any input from the audience on this, any views that you've got about how we ensure engaging learning experiences in the organization. So if you're in the room, please share your thoughts. And we're going to have 7 of these questions. We'd love to get your feedback on them. How do you currently ensure engaging learning experiences in your organization? I've been chatting with people here in Vegas, and in fact, I've been doing a lot of presentations recently over the past month where I'm having conversations with, and there's this feeling about engaging learning experiences, again, has very often been focused on the individual staying in a course. And for me, when I ask this question to people, very often the answer I'm getting is around retention times and course completions, which is not actually what I'm looking for. And it strikes me that perhaps the answer that I'm getting is based on people's perception that an engaging learning experience is one that is completed or found to be enjoyable. I'm not sure that's, going back to our previous look at definitions, exactly what people should be thinking about when it comes to that. Dominic, can you just give me your thoughts about this, and then we'll come to what's coming in from the audience. So what's your views on how people you're talking to are ensuring engaging learning experiences?
Yes, and this is, I think, a really critical area, because here at Cornerstone we have a conceptual model we call you, me, and we. And for me, it's a key part of creating these engaging learning experiences. And if I just turn to each of those in turn, so you is very much what I would say is traditional learning, what I need to be able to do in my role today. But it's really the me and the we that turns it into that engaging learning experience. So as well as just looking at what the business needs me to do, it starts to allow me to pursue the learning that I want to follow, I want to engage, so that I can hopefully grow to be the best version of me that I can be, and ultimately perhaps take my career in a different direction that enables me to face new challenges and grow new capabilities. So that's the me part. And then we come on to the we. And I think this is so important, because it's a fundamental change that needs to happen as we move from perhaps traditional education to workplace education and learning, because I think it's still pretty much the same. Certainly when I was at school at university, it was all about competing. Yes. And actually that's the last thing we need in the workplace. We need collaboration. And that's why when we talk about the power of we, what can we learn as a collective, harness the power of the crowd? So it's delivering that flip. And if you can add the me and the we to your learning program, I think that's going to fundamentally change how engaging it is, building that connection both with you and your aspirations and as part of a learning collective. And for me, what that's really delving into, Donald, is harnessing the power of self-motivation. What is more engaging than a conversation where ultimately I'm trying to mentor you, support you, to be the best version of yourself. So that's how, certainly a lot of the conversations I'm having with people and business leaders is, how do we add those two key dimensions?
I love this theme of connectedness that you keep coming back to, Dominic. I think that's really interesting, and it's because we tend to focus on the individual in L&D.
Yep.
It's something which is often overlooked, but obviously so important. I say obviously, it is important, but perhaps it may not be obvious. Some thoughts from the people in the room. Claire says, noticing the need to shift it out of the course and into the workflow. I think that's very much part of making it serve my needs. Sorry, we were about to say something there, Dominic.
No, I was just totally agreeing with that, because one of the terms I really like is the concept of learning in the flow of work, meeting people at their moment of need. So I totally agree with that, Tom.
And Kay's talking about offering different formats, PDF, podcasts, animations at the top level, reducing the amount of unnecessary content and ramping up the relevancy of the content, e.g. branching. So I think this business of relevancy is really important. It's not a matter of necessarily doing something that's all razzle dazzle, but relevancy. I always say people will absolutely go with something that you produce if it fits their needs. People will love ugly content that fits their needs over beautiful stuff that is overproduced but doesn't. And I love Kay's point here about reducing the amount of unnecessary content. Dominic, we may come to this later, but as it's been brought up here, can we just quickly look at that? How do we ensure we're being engaging by not overdoing the amount of content we're throwing at people?
Yes, and this is where I think it's really important to start to look at content as a strategy rather than a commodity. And ultimately, one of the things I often imagine when I think about content is a bookshelf, right? And on the left, we kind of want to have some content to encourage people to be readers. But by the time we get to the far right, we want to actually start to encourage those readers to be authors. And it's about how you take them on that journey from being good readers to highly focused authors. And I think this is where it's really important to take a layered approach, and also that connection we were talking about, Donald, right at the start. So, right at the start, you're going to look perhaps for some AI to do some of the heavy lifting, to sort of move some of the books into long-term storage that aren't relevant for the particular reader that's turned up at that bookshelf. But then it's about actually, how do we start to align that reader with the precise content? And that's where this connected approach comes in. So, connecting people to the right content has to come into the performance conversation. And the performance conversation itself has to move to be performance and mentorship. So this is, again, a second opportunity where you've gotten a chance to really align and meet that reader in their moment of need, where they're at. But then for me, the third step is really providing them with the platform to create the content so that they can become part of the we that we were just talking to. And we all start to learn together and harness the power of the crowd to start to take that journey towards creating business capabilities that are going to make a fundamental impact to business growth. So that's certainly how, I hear people talking about it, and we're very interested in here at Cornerstone.
Thank you for that. I'm aware that I've been sort of taking things out of order. The fact that it came up from the audience, I really wanted to jump on the idea of the surplus content. But I love the bookshelf idea and people taking books off and moving them around. And I'm always a believer in going with the flow of the conversation. We've got some great comments coming through, and Claire loves your idea of going from reader to author. And Katya also saying this idea about providing different media of learning products is really important. And it is really important to make sure that people aren't always necessarily doing the right stuff. Surely content curation. Well, Amy, we're going to come to that in a second. Yes, is more hopeful, not aggregation. One of the best books on workplace learning. We've got Edwin making a suggestion there in the notes. Let's move on, because Amy's brought this up. Curation is key right now, just like museum curators. Excuse me. The secret to successful learning experiences centers on what your story, narrative, and context you add to the presentation of content. So I love the idea of the museum curator. I think museum curators are underrated as a group of people who help us understand things, because we take it for granted. We're going to see stuff. Most of what you see in a museum is just the surface of a vast collection, and it's chosen and put together and interpreted very carefully. So Amy, thank you for your point. And it's got 3 thumbs up next to about how curation is key. How are you dealing with the content chaos of surplus content? So if there is surplus content, you talked about taking books off shelves and making sure it's relevant for people. Can you go into that in a bit more detail, Dominic? Because it is crucial. And everyone in the room, I'd love your views on this, because it's a biggie right now. How are you dealing with content chaos? Dominic, over to you.
Yeah, no, I think one of the most important things that we're seeing in learning is, I think if we wind the clock back, learning was focused very much on what needs to be done, and the how it got done was kind of baked into the what, because the how was the best way, never really changed. Well, the one thing we know about business today is the rate of innovation, and therefore the rate of change. It's both the fastest it's ever been and the slowest it will ever be. So for me, these 2 dimensions, the what and the how, are beginning to separate. And I think what we need to be doing is, first of all, making sure that we have content that covers both of those dimensions. We need to use AI, probably centered around somebody's skills profile, to help us curate a highly personalized learning journey. So clearing all the books aside, so that the books that they see are very relevant to exactly where they are, both in their journey today and the journey that they want to take going forwards. And then I think it's really, really important that you start to mix that content with, if you like, some what I would call internet and premium content, but also content that's created by subject matter experts that they recognize inside their business, because that's going to make that bookshelf feel a whole lot more important. And last of all, you can't talk, having talked about AI, and I think that's kind of compulsory for any workshop we do right now, but we can't forget the other pair, or the other partner to that, which is data. And that's about really bringing what I would say is industrial grade web analytics to how your content is being consumed. So you can check 2 things, right, Donald? You just don't want to understand what's being used and what's not, because just because something's not being used doesn't mean it's not important. And that's where it's really important to combine, if you like, analytics around usage with priorities of the business, to make sure that actually the content isn't being used, doesn't need to be revisited. So that's I think how you deal with or start to take the first steps on surplus of content. But hey, listen, it's a really big challenge.
It's a huge challenge. I do know that one of the Cornerstone clients, Meredith Well out of Deutsche Post DHL, is doing a great job in Germany, dealing with understanding the skills of the people that are in our organization and providing the learning to help them develop. So they are shifting a metric, which is to increase internal mobility of staff, so they're recruiting more internally than they are from the outside. And it is working. So I mention that because what you described, the idea that you match the content people presented with the skills profile, I think that it is something which is easy to describe. I just wanted to give people hope by mentioning that story, because not only is it easy to describe, it's easy to describe but difficult to do, but it is possible. That's the point. And certainly Deutsche Post DHL are doing it, which is fabulous news. Do you have any other examples of people who are doing it, Dominic?
I think there's lots of people. I mean, I would say DHL are pioneers. I think
Yeah.
where most of the market is at, really, Donald, is first of all finding the right skills taxonomies for their business. And ultimately, that doesn't necessarily mean a single taxonomy.
Yep.
You might need more than one. And then it's about how do we mobilize that? And for me, the best bit of advice I could give is to sort of break that down into manageable chunks and get technology to help you do that. So, again, that's where AI is so important as we look to do more in terms of delivering this highly personalized learning experience where the right content is on your shelf. So there's not just a shelf now, it's your shelf.
Mm, mm,
Okay.
mm, mm. I
There's a
love
lot of
that.
heavy lifting to be done, right? There's a lot of heavy lifting to be done. But that's where it's really important to embrace AI. Don't expect it to be an exact science. It's one of the
Yes.
things that's really interesting. When you work with technology, when you were working technology 10 years ago, the whole focus about testing was perfection. And that still has to be the case in certain areas of our business. But as we sort of move to this next generation of technology that's helping with things that we wouldn't even have dreamt of just even 5 years ago, we kind of have to get comfortable with good enough
Yeah.
to deliver what we're trying to do. So get some AI working that profiles the skills well enough. That doesn't have to be a manual process. And then the key thing is start to engage the audience about their proficiency on skills. Well, first of all, what skills do they have, and secondly, how proficient they are.
Mm,
And it's
mm.
where we all have to sort of mature, and we have to learn to trust and find, I would say, innovative ways of bringing enough validation to that data, because critically, once you have that profile, then everything else just falls into place in terms of technology finding the right content, technology finding lattice style career moves. But here's the thing I would say, Donald. What you've got to do is, it's really important, as well as finding that technical solution, to have the wider approach gain business mandate.
Yeah.
Ultimately, business leaders need to get behind this, because if people are going to prioritize this above other things, and we all know how busy our days are, the business really needs to signal that this is key to the future. So it's about technology and mandate. But you're absolutely right. Although a lot of people are at that first step, finding the right skills, mapping them to people, mapping them to content, mapping them to roles, they're beginning to that's beginning to happen, and that's the foundation that they're planning to push on
Yeah.
past once that's fully working.
Dominic, thank you for that. I mean, actually, we've been sort of spilling over, and this is my fault because I'm chairing very badly, failing to keep us within our remit. But we're spilling on to the next question. But it's a natural progression, and the idea that we're trying to compartmentalize things into questions, of course, doesn't reflect reality, which is that everything is integrated. We start with how do we have a great consumer-grade experience, and we find by interrogating the idea that it goes beyond a variety of media through to what you've just described, which is you need a skill strategy, and that has to be associated with buy-in. If you don't have that, it's not going to happen. So this is quite a step forward. But I think what we're seeing here is that it's all integrated. We're coming back to this idea of connectedness that you raised right at the beginning. Just want to come to our audience. Kerry says that we try to understand the difference between what we'd like them to know and what they need to know, and then work from that to achieve the outcome. And I think this point about internal motivation is crucial there. If you're not dealing with what people need, what people want to know themselves, and of course what we want people to know, then achieving motivation becomes very difficult, and motivation is the catalyst that either makes things happen or completely slows down all learning. Sitting says, Seaning Chan says, Context and curation of content. I love that. Context and curation. So people can get the right information to the right person, the right way at the right time, which is easily described and very well described here, but it's pretty difficult to do. It does rely on great technology. But I love your point, Dominic, about the idea that perfection may not be the goal. It may be that we just get to a good enough result and rely on human beings to do some of the sorting afterwards. Amy, who is very keen on curation, is saying content curation is the art and science of separating the gems from the junk and adding the story and context, going back to the previous comment. Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say I absolutely love that line, actually, the gems from the junk. I might be heard using that one going forwards.
I might stick it on a t-shirt. Yeah, we're focusing on learning campaigns with only a few gems to create a conversation. A lot of love for that comment coming from the audience. Nihai is saying reference curation. One way I'm learning at the moment about AI is with there's an AI for that curated list of new AI offerings. So other people are doing the curation. And then that sends a summary to Nihai's inbox on a regular basis. A similar principle would work well for corporate learners. A curated list in the fast-changing landscape. They'll say what they want, and the stuff comes through to their inbox. I love that, and I love the fact that you're driving that and making it happen. Learning campaigns, getting a thumbs up from Nicola, and Claire Dudy's put in a link through to the Meredith Wellard podcast with Red Thread Research. Yeah, always worth following Danny Johnson, Red Thread Research. So we've talked about skills here. I think let's go back and ask ourselves the question explicitly about skills and how this should be working with our strategy. I seem to have a connection problem. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. How do we align your L&D to employee and organizational goals? We've touched on that in quite a lot of detail, Dominic, and we have got other questions to go to. So it may be that we can move on to our next one about culture shortly. But is there anything you wanted to add, specifically looking at the skills strategy piece here?
Yes, I mean, just very quickly, I think you need to take a multi-layered approach. And again, this is something I see in the market all the time now. So as well as what I would say are holistic aims for the whole workforce, there's a fantastic opportunity right now for learning professionals to go and really engage with the business and say, okay, what's the roadmap for the business over the next 36, 60 months? How do you see that breaking down as a journey? And if we look at that journey, how does our workforce need to evolve? Because once you start to understand how it needs to evolve, you can start to think about what the skills are that perhaps need to be gained so that the workforce is ready just ahead of the curve. And for me, that's the most important thing about how you make skills strategic. It can't just be done by technology, but that's, if you like, the magic opportunity. Business has been never more open to a conversation about where it's heading and really looking to learning professionals to help them bridge the gap between perhaps what the capabilities business leaders want to see achieved, and critically what that means in terms of skills, because they'll be able to give you the capabilities, but they won't necessarily know the skills. And that's what talent and learning professionals need to bring to the party to turn it from being strategic to operational.
This comes back to a previous point you were just making about the need for buy-in at higher levels in order that people feel this is part of the business. You're not going to be able to have that conversation with that buy-in piece. So get the buy-in, make sure that that's in place, then you can have the conversation. But I've got a question for you, Dominic. You said that, look, they can give you the capabilities, but they can't necessarily know how that aligns to skills, which is true. But how well can they give you the capabilities? How good are people in the business in talking about capability in a way that makes sense for us to interpret in terms of skill? Is there a risk that people are saying things in too big a generality and we can't align that with skills because it's not specific enough? What's your experience talking out there in the marketplace with people?
Do you know what? It is a challenging area, but the way
Mm,
I break it down a little bit further is often those business leaders will be able to point to people in their ELT who have the capabilities that they're talking about. And for me, it's actually just time for human conversation. So, if they say, Donald's really good at accelerating the pipe, the size of qualified leads in our pipeline, for example. And they will be able to say that actually that's a real priority for us 6 quarters from now as we look at the overall vision we have for the business. And then it's just a case of go and talk to Donald. Go and ask Donald how Donald and his team are doing that. Have they acquired some new ways of working that mean that they can fundamentally do more with less? Because for me, that's what skills is all about, finding smarter ways of working. And it will
mm.
be happening in pockets in the business. And what we need to do is just make sure that the business leaders are expressing those capabilities in context of the right people. And when we have that, that's where we can make it real by going and engaging with those people, finding out how they're working or how their team's working. So that's how you can reliably bridge that gap.
And uh, I'm loving what you're saying. I'm also loving the chat we're getting through in the audience. Sorry, I just see Teresa and Kerry coming through with some stuff there. Um, but just going back to what you said there, Dominic, I think this idea of stimulating a conversation again comes back to what you were mentioning earlier about the idea that something could be perfect probably isn't the right test, but the idea that you get through to somebody talking about something, giving you an idea of it, and then being able to hone it from the conversation, I think is very powerful as an idea of L&D understanding what's happening in the business, not by taking orders, not by saying, oh, we need 3 of this type of person and 4 of that type of person, but
Yep.
rather being deeply involved with the business, understanding it to the extent where they can interpret what's being said to them, and then from that formulating, because they understand the business, the idea of the skills needed for the future. It's probably a step ahead of where a lot of L&D people see themselves right now, but I think it's absolutely where we need to go. And Teresa's got some great stuff about this. I'm going to just talk about a couple of her comments here. It can't just be done by L&D. It's a system-wide change. And she talks about the process being putting together a skeleton of the frameworks, the processes, and so on, alongside the job architecture and the data, and then the skills and the muscles on top of that. So regarding skills by themselves as being a solution probably isn't enough. It has to be part of a larger architecture. And she explicitly says, I'd caution L&D to not work on skills in a silo. When it comes to the tech, the data is key, and ensuring your data is clean. We'll come to data in a minute, I hope. Otherwise, the employee experience and the AI recommendations are garbage in, garbage out. And there's a real problem with that because uh, getting skills architecture right is an investment in time and commitment from people. And if people are going to commit to it, you really need to be sure that that commitment is honored in something that's useful. If they put the effort into it and they don't get something valuable out of it, there's every risk that when you try to get it right second time around, they won't be there to support you. Kerry raises the point of stakeholder management, exactly what you're saying, Dominic. Key conversations with functional heads, C-suite, team leaders around their L&D challenges and what we need to do to facilitate the right outcomes. Creating capability and skills frameworks, Nicola says, alongside career pathways, again, linking it to the career pathways individual needs, to allow for both linear and lateral career movement. That's really important. Dominic, let's just take up that point of Nicola, this idea of linear and lateral career movement. How much are organizations at the moment happy to think about people moving sideways or diagonally rather than just upwards in a career path? And how open are they to the idea, and how much are they able to do that with the sort of technologies they've got?
Yes, I mean, it reminds me of a conversation I was having just last week with a major customer of ours from the Middle East. And their business is transforming in terms of, if they were to wind the clock back 3 years, there were probably 2 or 3 main building blocks to their business. As they look the road ahead, there's probably going to be 10 building blocks to their business. And
Mm.
what they understand is it's really important that they get the right person in the right place with the right skills and the right mindset. Okay. So they understand that actually this partnership between their workforce and growing the business is itself highly connected. And ultimately, the world of work is going to get more complicated. That's unavoidable. And therefore, people who can succeed in this more complicated world of work, it's just become twice as important to get them in the right place. And therefore, achieving this lattice style movement of careers is going to be not vital from an employee engagement point of view. It's going to be vital from a business growth point of view. And then the other thing that's coming through strongly with the market is actually, business a lot is about acquisitions and disposals, right? So when you acquire a business, it's really important to understand the future potential, not today's potential, the future potential that you've just acquired. Skills is really good at, if you like, uncovering somebody's DNA and ultimately their potential. So again, it's really important on acquisition, and likewise on disposal. Do we really understand not the current competency, but the future capability that could be going out the door, and the knowledge with it, and how are we going to manage and minimize the impact of that? So it's actually a multifaceted challenge that we're talking about there, but it's a business one, not an employee engagement one.
Thank you for raising
in isolation.
That. Thank you. Really, really good point. I hadn't thought about raising the point about future capability, but it is crucial. Charles raises an interesting point, which I'm not going to dwell on, but he says, of course, the other problem is people using bots to do L&D activities, which is trivial to do on most platforms. And I think it's I think that's true. I would say though, if people can do these things for themselves, perhaps that's not a problem, but perhaps it doesn't mean that L&D needs to rethink what its role is, and perhaps we shouldn't be be happy for them to do it, but then we need to make sure that it's what people are doing is working in the right direction. We've got about 10 minutes left, Dominic. I'm going to move on to our next question, which is a sort of step into the supporting infrastructure for all this. We probably won't get through our full 7 questions, but I'd much prefer having a rich conversation around it than trying to rush. Teresa, last word from Teresa on skills. Gartner research shows focusing on developing future skills is also a cautionary tale. If skill isn't used, then we can have problems. Let me just scrolled up. If the skill isn't used, then it's a waste of your budget investing on these skills which aren't used. So you need to focus on your business strategy to make sure that what you're developing is useful and used. Sining Chan saying, I find the system-wide changes and leadership buy-in require champions in key leadership roles and identifying specific performance goals gap that's backed by data and stats. Great comments there. And the third point, work with a champion to create a quick, lightweight L&D solution. That actually, in one comment, is a really good summary of how to make change happen generally in an organization, and of course, particularly with skills. Let's have a look then at the what I call the supporting infrastructure for this. I don't mean technical infrastructure, I mean the cultural infrastructure. What steps are you taking? So everyone in the audience, just think about this one. I'm going to throw this one to Dominic, and I might answer it myself as well. What steps are you taking to support learning at scale and speed in your organization? So we've talked about all these different things that go towards making it engaging and making it a consumer grade experience. And we've got from the beginning of talking about content right through very quickly to the ideas that you need a supporting skills infrastructure to support a really, truly consumer grade experience. But my hypothesis is, and it's supported by Cornerstone's research, is that the steps you need to take to support learning at scale in your organization requires having the right culture. So Dominic, can you tell us something about this and what you're seeing in the marketplace? That how are people making sure that learning isn't something that is simply a bolt-on, but it's part of what goes on in the organization?
Yes, and we've touched on that, and some of the audience members have shown it through their comments in the chat. It's about, first of all, connecting learning initiatives to business. That's number one. That's what's going to give you that clear mandate and critically permission to take some of people's bandwidth to effectively invest in their future, to invest in the future of the business. But for me, again, it's really that's a must, but it also needs to be reflected in critically the line manager employee relationship through what's happening in performance. And what I would say is performance needs to evolve to be performance and mentorship, where basically people's skills, career aspirations, current contribution is being brought together in a single pane of glass, so that we're working as a team, myself and my manager, to guide me through what actually can be quite a complex potential journey that needs breaking down into manageable steps so that I can see what I need to do and I can see myself making progress. So, we talked right at the start about connection. I think it's really important as you're looking to change culture, you look across what it means for each of those 7 dimensions. But the one I would immediately go to is performance and turning that into mentorship so that I have more connection with my line manager. The last thing is, having got that in place, it has to be made easy. So we all only have so much time. Time has always been pressure in business, and it continues to be. So sometimes processes have to be re-engineered because no more time can be created. So good example of that is, if we look at the performance process, instead of having half-yearly annual appraisals of the contribution I've made, we have regular check-ins that mean actually that precious time every 6 months, we're kind of prepared. And instead of the first half an hour going on agreeing what has and hasn't happened, that takes 5 minutes, leaving much more of the conversation for a value-added aspect about where do we, from our you, me, we model, where do we want to go as a business, and how are you going to maximize what you get from that? Not sure if you're on mute there, Donald.
I managed to get through the whole of LTAF without doing the "you're on mute" thing, and finally I fell into the trap. I was coughing earlier, so I muted myself, and I fell to unmute. Yes, the connection piece is crucial. The technology enables us to be connected physically, enables us to get stuff to people. But the other part of the connection piece, which you mentioned right at the start, Dominic, and I love this as a theme, is the stuff that comes through the culture. And the real connection that, for me, makes the most sense in terms of being able to support learning at speed and at scale, and which comes back to the idea of a proper consumer-grade experience, is the connection between the line manager and the employee. The sense that you've got somebody who cares about your development. I'll come back to this conversation again that I had last night with this chief learning officer, ex-chief learning officer of General Mills. They were saying that they were looking at great managers in their organization. They did the research and they found that the great managers had 3 characteristics. They cared, they developed, and they challenged the people underneath them. So you might not like your manager, but you absolutely respected them and you had the connection with them. And so that culture, which enables all of the rest of it to take place, probably is fundamental to making things work. If you don't have the relationship between manager and employee, then the rest of it will get you so far, but not as far as you could do otherwise. I'm aware that we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to jump into some of the questions that we've got and some of the points that we've got from everyone in the room, and then we're going to push on, I think, probably to our final wrap-up thoughts. Great point from SC saying, great book on how to equip managers to have career coaching conversations with the direct reports is Russ Laraway's book, When They Win, You Win. And it is a great book. Thank you for recommending that. Nicholas says, should it be at speed? A focus on targeted incremental growth feels like it has more impact and staying power. That's a great question, actually. So how much is speed important, Dominic? And how much is just making sure that you're improving 1% each day, which can have a tremendous effect at the end of the year? So how important is speed, Dominic, as a final wrap-up thought here?
Yes, I think quality is more important than just reporting speed. If it's going to have impact, it's got to be making, I would say, a grassroots change in terms of how the employee views their relationship with the business, and critically, the connection to its purpose. However, that has to be balanced. If you are going to keep your executive leadership team on board, it's important to be seen to be delivering. So for me, I think there always has to be evaluation of the need for some short-term impact as well as building long-term capability. So, one of the things we talked about is not chasing perfection. I think that sort of applies at this stage. We can't be just focused on what's going to come 3 years from now. We need to give something now. But I totally agree with the point.
I think it was Voltaire. This is something that's come up previously in this series of webinars, who said that one shouldn't let perfection be the enemy of the good. The idea being, or he to paraphrase it, and the idea being that if we are constantly striving for perfection, we never get to what we need to get to. And actually, we've got a lot of reflections in the chat about the idea of speed here, and one of them is from Teresa saying, well, perhaps we should go fast to go slow, and Nicholas saying, agrees, small goals with an eye on an evolving longer goal. So in other words, you're not tactical just for the sake of it, but you set it in the context so people know where they're going to. Maybe momentum rather than speed, Kerry says, because if you can go, a glacier has momentum, but it goes very slowly. And it's also the change, Teresa says. How much change can the business and the people tolerate? Dominic, we've done jolly well, I think. We've gone through, I think, we have, excuse me, we've done 4 of our 7 questions, so we've got over halfway. But the other questions were data, talent mobility, and performance management. And I have to point out that we've actually covered quite a lot of that as well in the answers we've given to the previous questions. So I don't think we've completely flunked our homework. Is there anything you'd like to say as we come towards our last minute about wrapping up the idea of your talent health index, these key 7 factors, and how a consumer grade experience goes well beyond simply a well-polished product? Dominic, any last thoughts?
I think you've summed it up really, really perfectly, Donald. And it's for me, it's about, by focusing on connection, either to the needs of the business, the needs of the employee, or having that connected layer of thinking as you look to bring about business change. That is what it means to deliver a consumer grade experience, together with very much meeting employees where they are. And that for me is a multifaceted thing. It's about meeting them where their current proficiency is, where their ambition is, what they're doing right now, where their immediate need is. So, by bringing those together, that's what a consumer grade experience means to me. Any closing thoughts from you, Donald?
Yes, absolutely. I think that first I'd like to say thank you for coming along and sharing this really deep understanding, because you're out there talking to people all the time. You've got the talent health index behind you, which is brilliant. I've dropped the link in the tab. I'm also just going to cheekily put in a link to the Learning Technologies Awards, which are on the 15th of November. And that's our next Learning Technologies event. If you're able to come get a seat, please do come along. That would be fabulous to see you. We've had over 2,000 people, Dominic, attend these sessions at Learning Technologies Autumn Forum. That, I think, comes back to your initial point, which has gone like a red thread through this, that what matters is connection. It's connection between people and what they're learning, between what they're learning and the business. So people are motivated to learn it intrinsically, but it's also, there's an extrinsic link between the content and what the business needs. And also, of course, as we've said, you said very eloquently, connection between people themselves, connection in the workplace between managers and individual employees. But I'd also like to say that I think what we're trying to do here with the Autumn Forum itself is provide a connection between people. Over 2,000 people getting online, sharing thoughts, sharing ideas together. For me, if we can keep doing that, because L&D can be quite a lonely profession, if we can keep doing that, I'm not saying we're always going to provide a consumer-grade experience, but I would certainly hope that it will be the first step towards making the learning everyone gets from these sessions now and in the future as applicable and relevant to each individual we have on the conference. I always say we have presentations, but what really matters are conversations. So please, if you're out there at the moment, you're in the room and you've enjoyed this, please link in with other people who are in the room. Please get in touch with Dominic and make sure that, I would say, connection is your mantra for going forward into the next year. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dominic, for sharing all your thoughts. We're over time. I'm a terrible chairman. We're over time. It's nearly breakfast time here in Las Vegas, and it is great to have been with you. Final thoughts coming through. Charles is saying, great session, really enjoyed it. Well, thank you for your comments, Charles, and I really enjoyed those as well. And a great end, Marita says, to the forum, dotting all the I's. Thanks to Donald and Dominic. A lot of thank yous coming through. That's always lovely to see. All right, I'm going to wrap it up now and take us home. And I look forward to seeing you, I hope, at the Learning Technologies Awards on the 15th of November or our next events coming up next year. Dominic, I'm going to hand it back to you for final words in this session looking at consumer-grade experiences. Any final word, Dominic?
No, just to say thank you. Thank you for joining everyone, and hopefully it's been a great session, and I love the idea of the connections that hopefully we've made here. Thank you.
I hope so too. Thank you very much. See you again online or in person soon, I hope.